A few years ago, an elderly couple was taking their usual walk along the shoreline when something unusual caught their attention. A powerful storm had passed through the area days earlier, leaving debris scattered across the beach. Most people were focused on the damage the weather had caused, but the couple couldn't stop looking at something else entirely. Several large shipping containers had washed ashore. The containers were scratched, weathered, and clearly no longer useful for transporting cargo. To most people, they looked like oversized pieces of junk that would eventually be hauled away and forgotten. The couple saw things differently. As they stood there, staring at the containers, they began talking about the possibilities. Neither of them had a detailed plan. They did not know exactly what to do with them, but they couldn't shake the feeling that those containers still had a value. What started as a casual conversation during a walk quickly turned into something much bigger. And when they finally shared their idea with friends, the reaction was not what they really expected. At first, their friends assumed they were joking. After all, who looks at a group of battered shipping containers and imagines a future project worth pursuing? The couple explained that they wanted to bring the containers onto their property and transform them into something entirely new. The room immediately filled with laughter. Some friends thought it was funny. Others were convinced that the couple would abandon the project within a few weeks. The skepticism only grew when they started researching what it would take to move the containers. Transporting something that large is not simple. Specialized trucks would be needed, heavy equipment would have to be rented, permits would need to be secured, and every company they contacted seemed to deliver another expensive estimate. The numbers were enough to make most people walk away. Several friends encouraged them to do exactly that, but the couple had already become attached to the idea. The more obstacles they encountered, the more determined they become. To prove that the project could work, soon they would have a decision to make in the end. The couple decided to move forward. Estimates were expensive, but they believed the containers were worth saving. After weeks of phone calls and planning, they signed the contracts and began arranging the transport. News of the decision spread quickly. Friends who had laughed at their original idea were now genuinely concerned. Some warned them they were risking too much money on a project with no guarantee of success. Others questioned whether shipping containers could ever become anything attractive. One neighbor even summed up what many people were thinking. Why spend all that money just to bring giant metal boxes onto your land? It was a fair question, actually. The couple didn't have blueprints to show off. They didn't have finished renderings or impressive presentation. All they had was a vision, and to everyone else, that vision seemed impossible to see. A few weeks later, the first pieces of heavy equipment arrived. Suddenly, the project was no longer just an idea, it was actually happening. And there was no turning back. The day the containers arrived, curious neighbors lined the roads to watch. Massive cranes carefully lifted each container into position while trucks rumbled across the property. The operation took hours. Every move had to be planned carefully, and one mistake could damage the containers, the equipment, or even the land itself. For the couple, it was an exciting milestone. For many of the onlookers, it looked like the beginning of a disaster. Once the cranes left and the dust settled, the containers remained. They were huge, cold, and industrial, and completely out of place. The criticism quickly returned. People driving past the property couldn't understand what the couple was trying to accomplish. Some even joked that they were building the world's most expensive storage yard. Others claimed the containers ruined the natural beauty of the landscape. Even a few supporters quietly wondered whether the critics might be really right. At that moment, it was difficult to imagine how the project could possibly live up to the couple's vision. Then, the cutting began. Over the next several months, the property became a construction zone. Workers cut large openings into the steel walls, sections of containers were connected together, new supports were added, and slowly, the giant metal boxes began changing shape. The transformation was not dramatic at first. To most people, the project still looked unfinished and confusing, but the couple could finally see their dream come true. Each week brought a small another improvement, a new opening, a new connection, and a new feature that hadn't existed before. Neighbors who had spent months criticizing the project suddenly found themselves slowing down. And whenever they drove past something was changing. The containers no longer looked like random pieces of cargo stacked on a property. For the first time, they were beginning to resemble part of larger design. Curiosity started replacing skepticism. People who once laughed now wanted updates. And then, one day, a major section of that exterior was finally completed. What everyone saw next forced them to reconsider everything they had said before. For months, critics had predicted the project would become an eyesore. They were convinced that the containers would always look like containers. But when the first major section of the exterior was completed, opinions began changing. And almost overnight, large windows had been installed, natural materials softened the industrial appearance, thoughtful design choices helped the structure blend into the surrounding landscape. And the difference was impossible to ignore. People who had once mocked the project now found themselves stopping for a second look. The couple still had plenty of work ahead of them, but for the first time, outsiders could see what they had been trying to accomplish all along. The containers weren't the finished product, they were simply the foundation, and now the foundation was becoming something genuinely impressive. Even so, the exterior only told part of the story. Guests found themselves looking around in disbelief. Many had spent years imagining what the finished project would become. Almost none of them had imagined this. The further they explored, the more surprising the home became. Every room seemed to challenge another assumption. One of the most talked about spaces in the home was not the living room, it was the way the couple had connected the house to the landscape around it. Large glass walls open up stunning views of the surrounding property, allowing nature to become part of the design itself. During the day, sunlight streamed into the house from every angle. The changing season transformed the view outside, giving the rooms a completely different feel throughout the year. Visitors often found themselves standing silently for a few moments, simply taking it all in. The bedroom offered the same sense of comfort and openness. What had once been a cold sealed container now felt warm, peaceful, and inviting. For many guests, that was the moment the full scale of the transformation finally sank in. The couple had not just repurposed a few containers, they had completely reimagined what those containers could become. Just imagine how many people drove past those containers and convinced the couple had made a huge mistake. Turns out they couldn't have been more wrong. If you enjoyed this story, hit that like button, subscribe for more amazing true stories, and I'll see you in the next one.